The Duke of Sussex has today admitted defeat in a libel case he brought against the Mail on Sunday. The royal outcast was suing Associated Papers over an article about his legal fight with the Home Office, but he abandoned the case just hours before his lawyers were due to hand over a list of relevant documents. Prince Harry now faces a hefty bill of around £750,000 for this botched attempt. Meanwhile, the feasibility of a slimmed-down monarchy has been called into question this week, following the announcement of two separate medical procedures for two of the royal big three. The king is set to be absent for a short while following prostate treatment, while Princess Kate will be out until Easter after abdominal surgery. The lack of depth in the royal reserves, as predicted by Princess Anne last year, has left the ancient institution thin on the ground and ultimately somewhat exposed. So I'm joined now by talkTV's royal editor Sarah Hewson and former royal editor of The Sun, Charlie Ray, but also joining us is media lawyer Mark Stevens. And as Prince Harry abandoning this case is breaking news, we'll go to Mark Stevens first of all. Hello, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a bit of a surprise, isn't it? Because it's pretty much in the sort of eye of the storm and the very last minute, and you would have thought that Harry would have had such expert legal counsel that he wouldn't have gone this far if the case was going to be abandoned at this point. What's been going on, do you think?
Well, he had a sort of sucker punch a few months ago when he sought to have the defence of the Mail thrown out and was unsuccessful. And as a consequence of that, he's going to have to pay about £50,000 worth of costs in any event. The judge, a very learned judge, Mr. Justice Matthew Nicklin, said, I think there's a real possibility that the Mail was exercising its right to an opinion. Of course, Harry had said that this story about his security meant the Mail had lied and was being cynically trying to gin up public opinion against him. But of course, ginning up public opinion is part of what newspapers do. So I think he was, and I think he understood this, riding for a fall. So he's decided to cut his losses, pay the legal bill for the Mail, and then carry on. He does still have many legal cases still outstanding, including against the Mail. So we will see him in court in London, but just not this May.
And explain to us about opinion, you know, what journalists are allowed to write and what journalists are not allowed to write. Because obviously, in someone's opinion, they could say almost anything, however pejorative, however derogatory, about somebody else or an institution or a business or anything at all. So where is the limit on opinion? How does that work legally?
Well, you'll remember that the Home Office decided that they would not pay for his close protection and security after he ceased being a working royal and moved to the United States. And as a consequence of that, there is a legal challenge to that still ongoing, which he's still taking. And we'll hear the result of that later this year. But I think people will realize that you can have an honest opinion that you think it's a waste of public money to fund protection for a non-working royal, and you could also hold the diametrically opposite view, perfectly reasonably, that he doesn't choose how he was born, and therefore the risk is because of his position and birth, and therefore he should have protection. And so the Mail was just exercising its view that actually weighing things up, the money that we would be spending, which would be significant, you know, a couple of million a year, wasn't worth the risk that was attendant on him now living in America, and he was ceasing to become a target because of his public works in the UK. And it's that kind of tension that was going on. He was obviously stung by this. He obviously wanted protection and still does. And is having to pay for it privately at the moment. And so obviously people have views about that, and the Mail had a very strong view. And the judge said, one of the things that we protect in a democracy is the right to hold strong opinions. And clearly that, I think, was going to be the flaw in his case when it came to trial later this year.
When these sorts of cases are brought, there's usually an argument, isn't there, Mark, of, that this is detrimental to the reputation of the person who is bringing the case to court. And it's always incumbent upon that person to prove, A, that they have a reputation that is glittering and untarnished and, burnished and golden, that can therefore be impugned, and C, that this beautiful reputation has to some extent been attacked or tarnished. And both things are quite difficult to prove, much more difficult than people might think, aren't they?
Yes, it relies very much on people's innate good sense, as you well know, Vanessa. So essentially, we lawyers invented back in the Victorian era a test. What would the reasonable person riding on the Clapham omnibus, on the top deck of a red bus in London, think about what they'd heard? Would they think it lowered the person in the estimation of right-thinking people? And, you can see how that might have been thought. But there are, of course, defenses, one of which is truth, but not applicable here. But the other is an honest opinion. The author was publishing their honestly held views, and we allow all shades and colours of opinion so that people can make up their mind about the issues of moment of the day. So even if my opinion is that Harry isn't worth protecting, then that's my honest opinion, and I'm entitled to express that. And I think, whether you agree or disagree with whether or not he gets protection, and of course that is going to be decided separately, the question of whether it's defamatory, I think it was right to have a defence in this case of opinion. And so they have been able to demonstrate, at least to Harry's satisfaction, I suspect, or his lawyers, that he is going to lose this case based on their opinion.
Is it possible also to argue in court that Prince Harry's reputation, for example, is not what it was, has to some extent been tarnished, and at his own hand, that some of the things that he's written about himself in the book Spare, including mentioning use of drugs, maybe itemising and detailing his, the manner in which he lost his virginity, having a punch-up with his brother, and all the different things that he's written about himself, you might say invading his own privacy. I don't know, many other ways of describing it, but is it possible to argue that his reputation isn't what it was, and partly he's been the architect of that, or is that not the sort of thing you'd hear in court?
Unfortunately, in this country, a person is entitled to have the court presume that they have an unimpeachable reputation. Even people who have been to prison, for example, can sue for libel if it's not related to the offence. And so our laws are very skewed in favour of protecting individuals' reputation. And so you do get a situation where people sue because they've been stung, but unfortunately they don't have a completely untarnished reputation. And this, of course, is one of those cases. He relentlessly invades his own privacy, many think, yet complains at the same time about invasions of his own privacy. And it's that dichotomy on privacy as opposed to libel. I mean, most of us have lost our virginity at one point or another, but most of us don't talk about it in detail as he does in the book Spare. And so I suspect that's more about privacy and invading his own privacy than a libel case which lowers you in the estimation of right-thinking people.
All right, one more legal question
I think
for you.
has to be seen in the context of his vendetta against the British tabloid media,
yes,
which we all understand, and maybe a very human reaction, but sometimes is ill-advised.
All right, my final question for you, Mark, and then we'll move to our royal correspondence. First of all, Mark, final question. Prince Harry has said he wants to be, an innovator, a champion of change, and to change the way in which the British press conducts itself, the parameters within which it operates on behalf of everybody else, to be a kind of revolutionary Joan of Arc of the press. Is he, and has he been, and will he be?
Yeah, I think he has done to some degree. I mean, so on his phone hacking cases, the courts have given him a lot of protection, a lot of leeway. He's won his case against the Mirror. There's another one coming up against the Sun. I predict he'll win that too. And then there's a third one against the Mail. And I think that's a more difficult case, but I think he's still got the possibility of winning it. And of course, I think he would say, I've stopped people phone hacking in the British media anymore. I think that's probably overclaiming, because I think the British media had stopped long before his cases, but he is able to point out the deficiencies, the past deficiencies of the British press. And I think that gives him some sort of satisfaction in this feeling that he has that the press in some way contributed to the killing of his mother.
Mark Stevens, thank you very much indeed. Let me move now to Sarah Hewson, our Royal Editor. Hello, Sarah. Thank you very much indeed. It was fascinating talking to you about this yesterday, but now we have this breaking news of Prince Harry abandoning this case at the 11th hour, and I wondered what your perspective on that was.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And Mark has just set out very clearly the myriad of legal cases that Prince Harry is involved in at the moment. And even for someone like myself who follows these things closely, it is difficult sometimes to keep up with them. But I think what we're seeing here is Prince Harry deciding to pick his battles. And in this case, perhaps given the legal advice that he was unlikely to win it. Also, the timing of this interesting, because today was the deadline for the disclosure of documents by both sides. And each side gets to choose which documents are disclosed. And then those documents could have formed part of a trial and been put out into the public domain. So we could speculate, were there things there that he didn't want in the public domain. But we have actually heard from a spokesperson for Prince Harry on the reasonings for him dropping the case at this stage. And they've said it's about focusing on the safety of his family and his legal case against the Home Office, which he's waiting for a decision on. They said, as is the nature with legal proceedings, years have lapsed since this complaint was first filed. In the time since, the main hearing relating to the Duke's judicial review has taken place, and we are awaiting the final decision as to whether RAVEC, that's the body that makes the decisions on the security for members of the royal family, acted lawfully with regard to his security. His focus remains there and on the safety of his family, rather than these legal proceedings that give a continued platform to the Mail's false claims all those years ago. I mean, it's not that many years ago, really, Vanessa, because this article in question in the Libel case was written in 2022 and was all about this battle with the Home Office. But the Sussexes suggesting that that is what he wants to focus on now, and the safety of his family. Might be seeing Prince Harry later on, we don't know, Vanessa, but he is due to be presented with the Living Legend of Aviation Award in Beverly Hills tonight. No confirmation as to whether he and Meghan are going to turn up, but that would be the first sighting of him since this, and of course since the news about his father and his sister-in-law.
Let me bring Charlie Ray into this. I mean, Sarah's just mentioned, Charlie, the news about his father and his sister-in-law, and certainly many commentators today are talking about the fact that Harry and Meghan, the Sussexes, have not made a public message, have not issued any kind of public message of, you know, wish you a speedy recovery, we hope it's going to go smoothly, you know, sending our love to our sister-in-law, or any other thing at all. They've been, you might say, noticeably and distinctly stum on this one, when they've got a great deal to say about many other things.
It is a great piece of silence on behalf of Prince Harry and Meghan. I mean, you would have thought that, given that they've made statements on everything under the sun over the last couple of years, they could have at least taken time to sort of wish, you know, the King and the Princess of Wales good fortune and get back to health as quickly as possible.
You also think, don't you, that it could be a fantastic opportunity for some kind of rapprochement? You know, very often in families, you know, all these schisms appear, you fall out with people, especially after Christmas, you know, you get thoroughly fed up with them. Then when you hear that they're ill, they're going into hospital, you know, they're going to be, in the Princess of Wales's case, you know, at home till Easter, because obviously she's got some really substantial thing to recover from. You can use that, can't you? It suddenly jolts you into an awareness that you didn't really want to fall out with your nearest and dearest, and this is the moment to build bridges.
I think too much has gone under the bridge for any rapprochement, to be perfectly honest. I think they should have come out with some sort of public statement, just on the basis of it's the family and to be polite. But them coming back into the royal fold is just not going to happen. And if they can't be bothered, and of course we don't know if they haven't done anything privately, but publicly, if they can't be bothered to send best wishes, then there is no hope.
Let me bring Sarah Hewson back into this conversation. Sarah, what we've been talking about is the cost of these now jettisoned legal proceedings. We know that Harry's had to pay 50,000, and now we think 750,000, 800,000 pounds. One of the things that's been up for discussion in the last few weeks is whether Harry and Meghan have really got the funds to pay up for all this litigation.
I don't think we need to worry too much that they're on the breadline, Vanessa. You know, they had some pretty lucrative deals with Netflix, with Spotify, and okay, the Spotify deals come to an end, but it certainly means they were pretty well paid for it in the first place. Yes, Prince Harry given a legal bill at the end of last year for £48,000 for the first stage of his libel action against the Mail, and now the Mail are talking about costs of around £750,000. That's Prince Harry's legal costs and also theirs. A spokesperson for the Sussexes has said it's too early to speculate on costs at this stage, but it's not going to be cheap. There will be a sizable bill for him, but I think he can afford it. On Charles's point about the conversations and whether there's been any statement between the Sussexes about the health of the King and Kate, actually, I think if there's going to be any chance of rapprochement, any of those conversations need to be taking place privately rather than public statements. It is the public statements that they make that does get the backs up of other members of the royal family. We've been discussing, haven't we, row over the name Lilibet, Vanessa. I was talking to Robert Hardman, the author of that book, this morning about it, and he said what the Queen was annoyed about wasn't actually the choice of the name, but was that the Sussexes chose to put that conversation they had had with the Queen out there in the public domain. And so I think if they are to have any message for the King or Kate, it would be better done privately.
Finally, Charlie, one last question to you. Front page of the Times today, Prince Andrew and Harry now removed from that deputy duty that we knew they weren't really ever going to step up to do, but now kind of officially moved off the sidelines.
Yes, well, they're way off the sidelines. I mean, the King has always wanted a slimmed down monarchy, and he wanted this way back in the 1990s, and he was going to get it done, you know, when he became king. But of course, you couldn't forecast what was going to happen with Prince Andrew and what was going to happen with Harry and Meghan. And so you've got the situation now. There's very few members of the royal family. I mean, he wants to save the country money. He wants to give value for money from the royal family. But of course, you get things like this that crop up. And you've got, what now, 3-4 members of the royal family who will not be around doing official duties.